Ships. Okay,
Thank you.
girls, this is my, I think I'm really feeling very proud that I'm introducing Dr. Riaz Sheikh,
Yeah.
person who is not only well known in intellectual field, social activist and a political activist, but he's also very, very famous for his dealing with humans. And when he said that I do a lot of work, I think I don't do as much work as he's done for for the education sector and especially in the area of social sciences. So, Dr. Professor Riaz Sheikh is currently he's working with the ZEBIS, and he's the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences there. But what I want to really talk about him, because that's just a position, what I want to talk about him is that he's reviewed journals, which is a very difficult task. But he reviewed it for 3 years. This was of general. It was a journal of management and social sciences, and currently he's an editor also of another journal. So, girls, you would realize that it's such a difficult thing for us to write one article or to write a synopsis. And here we have someone with us who is an editor of journals. So you can well imagine the amount of knowledge that he will be bringing with us today, which he cannot do justice in the little time that Dr. Kiran has given to him. Uh, one more thing which I want to talk about it, and I think it's a myth with us that the minute we become intellectuals and we do research and we do journal work, we then move away from the realities, which is the pragmatism of life. But with Dr. Sheikh, that is a reality. I was very pleased when I was told that Dr. Sheikh is the one who has been reviewing the social studies textbooks for the schools. Now imagine this whole chain of work. Here comes his intellectual field, and here is he working with the textbooks to make sure that the textbooks are conveying the kind of messages that they should convey. And he's really been very, very humble and very tolerant of the inadequacies that our textbooks have. And I am a witness to those humbleness and his tolerance level. So thank you, Dr. Riaz, for building our capacities to write books that can make a difference in the society. I won't take a lot more time, but girls, just remember that Dr. Riaz is a very busy man. If he's with us, that means that either Dr. Kiran has charmed him or I have charmed him. Over to you, Dr. Riaz.
Rana, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know how Kiran can lower any person at any moment. I know. I know she has a guts, and you are placing a right people in your department who can you ask people and get hold of all those. First of all, thank you very much to Ziauddin University Education Department, and especially to old colleague Rana, and then my junior colleague Dr. Kiran Hashmi for asking me to speak to your students and faculty member on a topic which may be point of interest to our students and to young generation, because ultimately history has to be written objectively and then impartially. Unfortunately, we have been observing that there are biases, prejudice in our societal behavior, human behavior, and those things are reflected in our syllabus and curriculum as well. This is very unfortunate, and we have been trying to, you see, undo with all this process. Rana, you, Kiran, we always try to do and try to undo with wrong things which has been recorded in history, so that things should be straight. So in this context, when Kiran discussed with me, you people are selecting a topic on which we have to discuss what are the different prejudice and bias trained about Asia-centric, and while we are recording our history in our, especially in our social sciences subjects and social studies, so how we look towards the contribution of European society and how we compare and how we neglect at a certain stage these two different things. So I will be sharing a PowerPoint along with my discussion, and if you people want to raise any question when I'm presenting, so I'll be happy to respond, or otherwise we can discuss those things at the end of the session wherever you feel more comfortable. The topic given to me is really very interesting, because a lot of issues attached in our society are directly linked with this concept. How you project other, like in, as I am a student of sociology, so I think the group study is very important. How you portray other as a friend, or other as a competitor, other as a point of conflict or something else. As far as the projection of Europe in our books are concerned, so we have different trends. Honestly speaking, I will not say that it's a linear projection of Europe in our textbooks or something else, but it has been, you see, projected in different means. Sometimes you have a positive projection, and by and large, we have trends and traditions where we try to reflect our you see former colonizer in different trends, and it's a very difficult situation. When I discuss about these things, so I say okay, we have to see what has been the connectivity between Europe and Asia, because I will try to focus more on subcontinent or Indian subcontinent, where we have been the part of this territory, and we have a joint history and something else. So I will say that in subcontinent, Europeans, they arrive at different stages, from Portuguese to Dutch and French, and lastly the British, who have a long history. So during the British stay in subcontinent, ultimately a permanent interaction between Asia and the Europe become very visible, and they become very in close contact. And when the British, they came with their culture, with their history, with their experiences, and with their mindsets as well. I will not say that they came as a neutral partner, but they brought their mindset, their culture, and their superiority complexes as well. When they brought all these things to subcontinent, ultimately this was a interaction between Asian civilization, and it was an interaction between the European civilization. And at that time, the subcontinent was going through an anarchical experience. The Mughal Empire was collapsing. Regional governments, they were at larger hands. They were conflicting. Sometimes they were, you see, making some alliance with the British against each other, and there was a lot of chaos. So during this time, when the British came with their own history and culture. And I will say that when British, they entered in Bengal about a century ago, when they captured Delhi in 1857. So there was a huge gap between these two time frames. So ultimately, I'll say that during this time, when the British settled down there in Bengal, they bring all these major reforms in their setup. And the people, as intellectual in subcontinent, those who were exposed to these traditions, so they become very much aware of the advanced nature of European culture, history, their, you see, cultural practices and something else. So then I will say, okay, there was one acceptability about British traditions. And then I'm just referring names like Raja Ram Mohan Rai. He was one of the most important name who first time discussed this concept of modernity in Indian subcontinent or in Asian context, while following the European traditions. And his point of view was that our society cannot survive and will not be able to survive until we bring ourselves in the same level of modernity which is introduced by Europe, and ultimately we'll have to find. The second name which I have mentioned, because most of these names may be familiar to our colleagues and our juniors, our young generation, but the second name which I have mentioned is normally it's missed from our discourse. And this name is Nawab Abdul Latif from Bengal. And this was the person who, before Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in Bengal, you see, introduced this sense of modernity in Bengal, the concept of modern education system. And people, they say he was the precedent of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and he introduced you see Mohammedan cultural society and other activities, and he's called you see modern founder of modern education system in subcontinent. And as we are discussing marginalization, some biases, prejudices, so I will say we miss this person because we miss Bengal from our history, because we more focus on North India, we more focus on, you see, elite seat of learning. So that's the reason Nawab Abdul Latif and he was a great grandfather of Shaista Akramullah as well. So one has to see what was the connectivity, and then you have a long family history. Then we are familiar with Sir Sajid Ahmad Khan, how Sir Sajid Ahmad Khan talk about this concept of modernity, and then he introduced Mohammedan society as well, and then Aligarh College and many other things introduced. But another aspect which I will like to highlight is Sir Sajid Khan on one hand was talking about the modern education, but simultaneously he has some prejudice about gender biases as well. And in his context, he discussed education should be only for male centric. And that was, you see, I'll say, again, Sir Syed Khan has some biases about European practices as well. And when he said education should be for male centric, it's mean he was deviating from a journal European tradition of introducing modernization in the society as a whole. So this has you to see. And then the last name, Hassan Ali Afandi from Karachi, you have the Sindh Madrasa system, and ultimately Hassan Ali Afandi introduced the concept of modern education in this you see for long areas from mainstream subcontinent, and introduce something else. Then I will now looking to these two different things. Okay, on one hand, there is acceptability in subcontinent about the European culture, as I mentioned these 4 or 5 names. People, they are willing to accept modernity, and they are willing to you see shift their mode of education from the traditional one to the modern one, like going into the English language, adopting their culture. But along with this, you have some other you see trends as well within the society, and especially in the political terms I will talk about. And political terms mean that you are thinking that this colonizer has introduced many things which is against their culture, which is against their traditions. And then you become very apprehensive, okay, if you don't check this intervention in your life, in your actions, then ultimately you may lose your identity. And then sense of fear, which in a sociological terms we say, you realize some threats. And then I will say that there two trends emerge. One was that we have to preserve our culture, and not only preserve our culture, but we have to talk more about our culture, and we have to emphasize on our culture. And that's the reason we say that alternately madrasa system was emerged in subcontinent. Dominantly it was a Deoband madrasa system, which was previously introduced by Shah Waliullah. And then later on, it became very popular. Just few kilometers away from Delhi, strong system emerged in Muslim community. And second, within the Hindu community, people, they started challenging that this modern education system is going to disturb ourselves, and it is going to change our social system. So that's the reason they say, okay, we will go for Vidya path. And Vidya path was one of the concepts we say it means okay, we will go for our own mode of learning. And you will be astonished to know that not only the pathshalas were spread in subcontinent, but universities were established in different part of subcontinent. One is like in case of Varanasi or Banaras, Vijayapat University was established there. Then in Gujarat and other places, this was established. So now you have to see that there are two different trends. One is the trend where European concepts are becoming popular under the influence of Sir Sajid Ahmad Khan, under the influence of Nawab Abdul Latif, Hassan Ali Afandi, Ram Mohan Rai. And there is a parallel trend where madrasa system or the Vijay path with the conservative concept is becoming more popular. So these two divides have to be kept in the mind where the further developments take place. And within this concept, on one hand, you started talking about your identity in the religious terms, in the cultural terms. Along with this, new trend emerged, and one trend was within the majority Hindu community, the concept came the Saivaraj, which the Gandhi further promoted. Swaraj means the self rule we want, and we want end of colonization, or the minimum rule for the colonization. Whereas the Muslims felt they are in danger in subcontinent, being a minority. So they started talking about revivalism, the pan-Islamic movements. And Jamaluddin Afghani, you all know about Jamaluddin Afghani's the pan-Islamic philosophy. He talked about all Muslims from different parts, they should unite. And Jamaluddin Afghani talk about these things, these veteran traditions which is coming to our society, they are dangerous. And the Muslims from different part of the world, they should unite, and they should give a joint, you see, rebuttal to all these debates. So this is one of the basic you see need to understand how conflict was emerging and how it was going to be responded in the coming days. So so now I will show you just one to picture, so then you will realize how this mindset change, which I told you. On one side you have a mindset of Europeans who want change in the mindset of people in subcontinent. Like what McAlway says, ultimately we will introduce a system of education. We all are teachers and students, so we learn. I will not talk about more about this. Now look at this picture. On one hand, this is a Gandhi who was trained in Britain as a barrister and having a complete Western lifestyle, something else, having a good life there in South Africa, even sometime supporting partially apartheid as well. He said, okay, if you are making a difference between black and white, ultimately create a window for the brown color as well. And he said, I'm not going to join black color if you don't count me in a white color. At least create a space for the brown color. It means partially you are supporting apartheid in some other country, other area as well. So this is. But later on, when he returns back to subcontinent, he completely changes color. And now look at to his picture, which is you see symbolic presentation picture of Gandhi, to whom lastly the British Prime Minister gave him the naked fakir's name and something else. How he changes every color. Now look, two colors are reflected. One is you are attaching yourself with your people, those who are having the same dress code and everything. And second is reverse back to the situation. On one hand, Western society is introducing modern industrialization in your society, modern mindset in your society, but you want to retain your identity in the old culture, means going to the charkha system, going to the mostly you desire to do everything with your hands and something else. So this is like you on the political terms. On political terms, you are creating a biases from your actions. What the theory is, but your action reflect you are not endorsing Western culture. You are opposing the Western culture on the basis of your hatred or basis of your experiences or something else. So how a modern man move towards a conservative character. This I expand to our own leadership when I talk about Jinnah Sahib. Then I look to the Jinnah Sahib. A modern Jinnah Sahib, with all you see Western liking, accepting the Western culture and something else. When the compulsions come for Jinnah Sahib, when he feels we have to fight for our own Muslim community, so Jinnah Sahib changes his color after 1936 elections, and Jinnah Sahib takes a new color. It means now Jinnah Sahib again feels he had to go to his community, and instead of taking his community to the modern society, he himself changed himself with his livings, with his dress code and everything, and he goes to the people who may be not modernized in other sense. It means you created a biases for our society, acceptable living style will be which is close to our religion, to our region. So this is how the shift has taken place on political terms, where the biases have been projected deliberately in one sense. And now look to the pictures on two ends. You must be very much familiar. The picture I have placed in the middle. This may be a picture with hardly very few people may be familiarized. Fatima Jinnah is reflected, and this is a Karachi's picture where Fatima lived with her brother, and after that you see what type of you see reflections are there. So this is how from one acceptable things went to the contradiction, and contradiction shift towards the political term, where you change the mindset of the people. And when Jinnah Sahib changed his mind, so ultimately then religious clerks in Muslim society, they demanded, why do you stop here? Go further. And then this revivalism of Islam, and you see two nation theory, and ultimately objective resolution should be taken in this context, how biases further become more sharp and further become more strong in this concept. So how I will say I will discuss this issue. Now look, I'll just not only to discuss these things from a very you see things from other perspective, but I will focus on literature as well. Now look to this Iqbal's poetry. Now look to the Iqbal poetry, how Iqbal is, you see, doing a down looking to the Western society, and how Iqbal is talking about despite being that he was trained in Britain as a barrister, then he went for the PhD in Germany, looking to the nature of changes taking place in Europe, and how Europe was ultimately becoming a new power center in the world history. Is despite this, we have narcissism about our own culture. And then Iqbal says कि तुम्हारी तहजीब अपने खंजर से आप ही खुदकशी करेगी, जो शाखे नाजुक पे आशियाना बनेगा ना पायदार होगा. I mean, look at this के you are telling them के your system is not going to survive and not survive, then whose system will survive? Our system, which is quite, you see, insecure. It's a system which couldn't face the colonialism, and despite all things, like more Iqbal's another criticism on democracy, a democracy which was introduced by Europe and European culture as a most popular mode of governance in a human society. आज भी हम बात करते हैं every time who criticize that this democracy is not workable, this democracy can't survive, this democracy. तो look कि जमहूरियत एक तर्ज हुकूमत है कि जिसमें बंदों को गना करते हैं, तोला नहीं करते. What do you mean तोला? This is a completely a subjective term, because whenever like even in social sciences, like Rana introduced me कि I'm a student of a social sciences. So ultimately, even in social sciences, we have started talking about these things. We should have empirical studies. We should have quantitative things where we can prove our propositions, our hypotheses, are the questions we have in the mind, so that things are verifiable. Things can be verified with our data, not anything which is in other terms like taking it into this direction. Things are not. So to try to understand a Western system which has proved its you see acceptability in a society, but it is being challenged by the intelligentsia of subcontinent, and try to I'm not I will say malign them, but ultimately prove them that your civilization is much more, we have a more ingenious civilization. Like another example I will give you about the sense what is what's happening in the secular Europe, a Europe which has emerged from you see sectarian conflicts in the dark ages, and now they were talking about individuality, a secular society, where every person will be treated individual person on the basis of his performance, on the basis of his ability, not on the basis of his cultural identity, or the religious identity, or the gender identity. Look at to this how Iqbal just criticized on West के दयारे मगरिब के रहने वालों, खुदा की बस्ती दुका नहीं, खरा जिसे तुम समझ रहे हो वो अब जरे कम आयार होगा. Means the new economic world order system which is emerging, the new world economic system which is emerging, you are criticizing the world economic system, and still we are talking about our own system which her intelligentsia thinks it's more superior. And now the world has shown us that at that time our economic system was not so much perfect, and that's the reason West prevailed. And now I'm talking about the new terms. Ultimately, this is the century of Asia, but within the century of Asia, uh, R is an isosis which is not a part of the global economic system as well, global political system as well, because we are still following these things which we inherited because of the biases and prejudices we have towards the Western or the European society. So this thing. Now look to another which will talk about Nazir Akbar Abadi. Nazir Akbar Abadi, which I told you, when in Europe there was a emerging concept women has equal right. There is no difference on the basis of gender. Every gender, every human being has an equal right to participate in a society without you see differences or something else. That when it was coming as a popular concept, it is becoming popular. So at that time, how Nazir Akbar Abadi, you see, said something while looking to the women, which is who is participating very friendly human society as an individual. के बेपर्दा कल जो नजर आई चंद बीबियां अकबर जमीन में गैरत कौमियत से गड़ गया पूछा जो मैंने आपका पर्दा क्या हुआ कहने लगी कि अकल पे मर्दों के पड़ गया ना लुक एट हाउ द टॉन्टिंग वे is dealing with this के वो जो honors concept we have in our society के woman is a private property if woman is committing something so we have a right to do anything with the woman in the name of honor okay woman is a karokari siyakari whatsoever you call it it's mean के woman has to be confined in the four walls इधर मुझे याद आता है शौकत सदीकी इस नॉवेल चार दीवारी when you talk about the Lucknow society okay, what was happening during in Lucknow at that time when people they were coming out but our woman was confined to a wall and that's the reason when Dr. Rashid Hassan Khan Dr. Rashid Jahan when she wrote many things I'll think a progressive movement started playing very important role. So look at this thing okay, we wanted to keep our women confined to our four walls she has no right to participate in a human society which was coming from a European context and same unfortunately the mindset right now आपने सुना संडे के दिन when the Prime Minister of Pakistan unfortunately spoke very objectionably against a woman when he was talking about the rape in a society or something else. So how you think and fahashi and something else. This fahashi and something is very subjective terms. These are the biases and prejudices we have about any gender or any society that has to be addressed like this. So my point of view is that these are just few examples I have given you. Otherwise, there is a long, unending queue. But on one hand, I have these examples where we have criticized West. But along with this, I have another example when I talk about a progressive school of thought. And अदब में तरक्की पसंदी की सोच which was from Sajjad Zahir, which was from Faiz Ahmad Faiz, which was from other scholars. So in the same context, on one hand, we have these retrogressive concepts. Along with this, we have a progressive concept for this purpose. I'll just name one is name of Israrul Haq Mijaz, who was from Lucknow, and he wrote one poem, and poem's name was नौजवान खातून से I'm not going to read complete poem of Mijaz but I will just read 2 or 3 you see poem from her and her poem name is नौजवान औरत से he says हजाबे फितना पर अब हजाबे फितना पर्दा उठा लेती तो अच्छा था खुद अपने हुस्न को पर्दा बना लेती तो अच्छा था तेरी नीची नजर अपनी इसमत की महाफिज है which the prime minister is saying कि जी because there is a vulgarity there is obscenity in a society that is happening and what he progressive writer said तेरी नीची नजर खुद अपनी अजमत की महाफिज है तू खुद इस निश्तर की तेजी को आजमा लेती तो अच्छा था दिले मजरू को मजरू तर करने से क्या हासिल means a woman who is already considered as a you see neglected part of our society तो दिले मजरू को मजरू तर करने से क्या हासिल तू आंसू पोंछ कर मुस्कुरा लेती तो अच्छा था तेरे माथे का टीका मर्द की किस्मत का तारा है अगर तू साजे बेदारी उठा लेती तो अच्छा था means social awareness is required not to surrender but to fight for your right and that is a pure feminist concept which emerged from European context where women said okay, we are equal right and in our society we try to suppress it like what I told you in Nazir Akbar Abadi he is ashamed of this why woman is coming out of four walls where Asrarul Haq Mijaz says no woman has to come out from her home and she has to be part of society in a positive term and the last you see share of his poetry is very important when he said तेरे माथे पे यह आंचल बहुत खूब है लेकिन आंचल मीन द पर्दा जो वी हैव इन हैंड तेरे माथे पे यह आंचल बहुत खूब है लेकिन तू इस आंचल से एक परचम बना लेती तो अच्छा था it means what parcham says means that you take this flag of protest this flag for your rights then it will be a great thing and this is a purely the Western concept which came in our society. Yes, woman has to fight for the right, right, and right now you have a lot of objections about the Aurat March and something else which is very popular in the society. How I will, my point is, okay, there have been a conflicting point on these issues, and people have been going like this. Then I go further to debate. I will talk about some theoretical things about this discourse, and then we'll coming back to other situation. So when I look to this situation, ultimately Europeans who had a concept of superiority within their conflict, like you call it the white superiority, superiority conflict, and the concept which become very popular in Europe in case of Hitler's time, in case of Germany, and in case of United States, and later on other places. So the first concept which Weber, who is one of the most you see important sociologists as far as the functional theory is concerned, the theory of modernization is concerned. The Weber at that time, first time, he talked about rationalism, and his point of view was that Europe is a land where rationalism become very popular, and ultimately because of this rationalism, so the nature of societal relation change, the economic system change. But his point of view is in the context of Asia, this rationalism was missing. People, they were still strict to their religion, but like he said, in case of China, the imperialism was more important. In context of China, in the context of subcontinent, the caste system was very popular because of the division of the society on the basis of caste system. Ultimately, you were not talking about the rational concept. You were talking about something else. And that is similarly about Islam. He said in the concept of Islam, you're talking more about introvert discourse. You're not talking about something which may be popular. And his second concept of Oriental disposition, in the concept of Asia, your irrigation system, your physical system, they were so much dependent on the nature and something else because you are not brought any modernity. Ultimately, you dependent, and and you when you compare with this European concept, they say they introduce many things. Ultimately, they progress well. The second concept, which I will say, is concept of origin of capitalism. His point of view was since Europe has changed their Christianity, and they had brought many changes in their old system of Orthodox Christianity and the Catholic Christianity by introducing this Protestantism and other things. Ultimately, they found a space for a new emerging economic system in their society, and capitalism become a very popular. Whereas in the concept of Asian society, religion was so rigid in their policies. They were not willing to give any space to the emerging new economic system in their concept. So this is how I'm just running short of time. So that's the reason I'm skipping, and then if you find a time, so then we can discuss. The other concept, like when the concept of religion, when John discussed, he said, okay, we have to see how different religions they updated themselves. What I mentioned you in the Weber's concept here, their point was. And then David Lane's concept, the civil, they say in most of the that's a very controversial concept. You all are familiar. They say all colonizers, they arrived in their colonies with this concept that they will civilize their colony. So this is how a concept is very controversial. This is a European concept where concept was we are here on the civilization mission. So this is one concept. Now, when these concepts were on one side, when the European scholars, they were promoting this concept. So ultimately, in Asia, just I'm focusing on the subcontinent because we were supposed to talk about these things. So, the alternate discourse emerged. An alternate discourse, which they call the nationalist approach to address these things. And this nationalist approach, they say, no, it is not something like this. India has a very rich history, and we have been going through various experiences. Society has been responding to these needs, and they have been bringing changes according to this one. Like D.D. Kamboi, who is considered as one of the authority on the early medieval history of subcontinent, so he discussed this concept. No, in Indian society, how this concept of self-confined society was more popular, and how society created speech where a more tolerant society was in subcontinent. He said that you will not find any very significant communal conflict in subcontinent until the British arrived. Despite that, minority Muslims were ruling here and majority was Hindus. He said, but you will find in Europe there was a lot of religious conflict on the basis of secularism. Similarly, Professor Irfan Habib and Sayyid Habib, they have discussed a lot of things, how the this you see revenue system and other things were very much enforced in subcontinent, and society was creating lot of surplus, and that surplus ultimately was a system from where you see British further developed their revenue system. And last two name is Professor Pam Datti and Professor Hamza Alvi, the Marxian scholar who discussed this concept, how British, according to their concept, they demolished the conventional industrial system in subcontinent, because in subcontinent textile was very popular. Khadar, Susi, then Malmal in Bengal, they were very much popular in Europe as well, and they were very valuable as well. Pasham ka kapra, other things. They say that the British for their own Manchester and other British centers, textile industry, they demolish this concept. So means that on one hand you have one argument, on other hand you have a argument which is totally challenging this argument, and you have two extreme versions on which the economic discourse should go forward. Now, this is a historical debate. I'm coming to the current situation when we say this debate now ultimately converge into a formal academic discourse, and this academic discourse we call it the subaltern school of thought, and it is like what was introduced in France, we call the analyst school of thought, where ultimately it was discussed that in case of in case of French colonization, what happened in North Africa, where Fanon talk about many things and other things emerged. So Edward Said talk about what happened in Middle East during those, when he talk about Orientalism and many things. So this subaltern school of thought become very popular, and subaltern school of thought has been focusing more. What Kiran asked me to, we have to focus when we are writing our books for our school, for our new generation, to just try to ultimately become more prejudiced and biased when we are projecting our civilization, our history, and we compare it with the European history. So unnecessarily we become much more, we start giving more patronage to our tradition and culture without realizing that there have been something wrong in our history as well, that we have to discover, that we have to find out what has been done wrong in our history. That's a reason we have left behind this process of development and something else. We have not been able to compete with this situation. So I suggest that simultaneous school is very important. But along with this, what FICO said, even this discourse should be taken with critical discourse. Okay, this should be seen with a critical eyes. Okay, ultimately, should we take all these concepts without bringing them in a public discourse, or we should bring these accept these concepts with some reservations as well, and start thinking on the basis of new academic research is coming up, other things which is a part of this one. So while I think the subaltern studies has been focusing more while eulogizing, projecting our culture and tradition, but because of this, we have been ignoring some good practices which were introduced by a European society. And I will say, okay, we should we should focus on this. We should be honest, and we should be honest and partial and neutral while discussing these things. Like when we talk about something about our own culture, something else, so we miss few things which were introduced to our society and to the global community under European, you see, history and European efforts. Like one of the important concept, enlightenment. We call it in Urdu खरद अफरोजी, आसानी में कहते हैं तो you call it रोशन ख्याली की theory. So we don't discuss enlightenment in our discourse while we are talking to our students, okay, what was the impact of enlightenment in European society, a society which was like Locke and other people, how they, Hegel and other people, they contributed, Descartes and other people, they contributed towards society. And unfortunately, that concept is missing in our society because we never produce such a critical discourse, and at least for the last 5 to 600 years of our history, so we'll find okay, we don't have same level of critical thinkers in our society which Europe produced, unfortunately. So we have to see in our society, because of this absence of concept of enlightenment, our society failed to create a tradition of tolerance. Society failed to create a tradition of critical discourse. So we have to accept that yes, this was a missing link in our society, and because of that we suffer. But along with this, we should discuss with our students okay, how this is enlightenment can play very important role in societal development, in societal emergence of certain things. The second concept is the public sphere concept, which was given by a great Marxist German scholar, Jürgen Habermas. And Habermas says that we have to see that in 14th century onwards, how European society, under the influence of enlightenment and emerging new trend, society gave a public sphere in Europe, and ultimately public sphere means freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Whatsoever you think, you have to discuss in a society without any fear and sense. And new philosophical and political discourses they emerge and become very popular. This we have to again think in our society. This absence of a public sphere has been one of the major reasons. This freedom of thought, like I'm sure you people must be pressing what is happening, like with Amar Jalil right now, unnecessary, a great short story writer, the intellectual and the novelist, has been accused of on the basis of a story he wrote about years ago, and without any critical discourse. So you have to see a society has to create this space, and this we have to create. You should teach our young generation that Europe has gone through the worst experience of sectarian conflict, witch hunting, and other thing in the medieval and the late medieval ages, but they improved. And now you have an idea intolerance is very high in our society. So how, and I can give a complete lecture on this concept of public sphere at some other time if you like. So how this public sphere concept must be taught to our young generation when we want to teach our young. Third is the institution building. You look at this situation, we think these institutions are meaningless, and these institutions have no significance in our society, and these must be you see ignored in our society. But these institutions have a very significant role in our society, because these institutions provide a social solidarity in a society. These institutions, they provide impartial justice to the society, from education to judiciary to police system to your banking system to financial system. These institutions are, even your parliament provides you a lot of participation, your democracy, your election processes. They gave you the sense of participation, and people that think that they are on board on all these systems, and they are part of this one. So institution building is very important concept, which gave a Europe a systematic understanding about the emergence of human society, and all things are processed in a system. Things are not at the mercy of the individual, but things are being processed through a system. This which is missing in our link, or we have deliberately kept those things missing. So this we should include a system, and we should tell our young generation how institution building is institution development is very crucial for a human society. Same is Europe has gone through a feudal system as we have, but their feudal system was completely different nature of feudal system, and we have a different nature of feudalism in our part of the world. But how feudalism was undo in Europe, how it was discontinued. At least we have three successful model of end of feudalism in Europe: the German model, the French model, the British model. And all these three countries have different, and three nations have a different practices to undo with the feudalism. Whereas in our part, we have failed to, you see, reverse this concept of feudalism in our society, and ultimately, and you have an idea, we have an idea, because of the perpetual feudal and the tribal society in our society, how society is becoming more myopic in our approach, and elite culture is being promoted in our society despite our all efforts. So this is a concept on which we should engage our young generation, so that they should realize that individuality, individual performance, merit is more important instead of your family tree, which is a source of your identity. And for this, the feudalism has to be challenged in our society. The next concept which I'll discuss is the urban middle classes, which emerged in Europe, and then urban middle class played the role of, you see, engine in societal change. When they started thinking, then they started talking everything objectively on the basis of intellectual input they got from the universities, from the think tanks, and something else, which become very popular. But in our context, we try to suppress knowledges. We try to suppress knowledges, and we created a middle class which is not tolerant. Rather, they are more religious oriented, and they are trying to create a society which is not inclusive society, which is honestly speaking an exclusive society where you try to marginalize people on the basis of your experiences or something else. That is becoming. And along with this, when we talk about the moral values or something else, talk about what in European context is honest taxpayers there in Europe. People, they are very, you see, transparent in their actions and something else. Whereas we talk about this when the people they try to avoid their taxation or something else. People they try, आज हम बहुत आराम से बात कर लेते हैं कि in Europe, if you go to the midnight, if the signal is red, the person will stop his vehicle until, despite there is no flow of traffic, but he will stay there, because these are the moral practices they have developed from this learning. Whereas in our sense, people they hardly bother to discuss these things, because society has compromised on these things. So that is to be discussed, okay, how these gradually introduced to society, and ultimately society reached to this conclusion where to talk. Similarly, आप सुनते हैं कि आप वो जो I told you कि on Sunday when the Prime Minister discussed कि जी rapes increasing, so you attach those concepts. So why it's not happening here? I have an experience when I used to travel in the midnight on a bus from Oxford to the London. Ultimately, a single woman dropped in the middle of the city. It's a complete rural area, and she has to wait for a connecting bus for minutes and hours without any fear that somebody will come and you see rape or something else. So this is how the moral values emerge in a society, that we have to teach instead of teaching something else, which is having something romantic in our approach or something utopian in our mouth. We have to come to the reality. The same, the next is the respect for the human right. Respect for the human right in all terms, whether you express freedom of expression, whether freedom of your media, whether freedom of your press, of equal rights and something else. Human Charter, coming from the Magna Carta, has become a very popular concept, and then it was adopted by UN and by other global communities, that we have to teach our young generation in our courses how this human rights issue is a very pertinent question. This should not be ignored on by keeping on the side. Our traditions they provide you sufficient safeguard. No, our traditions don't provide sufficient safeguard. When you have a tribal society, when you have a feudal society, ultimately everybody is at the mercy of your elite people who control this tribal and feudal system. So this you have to bring. Okay, it should be equally. It should be treated on the equal basis. The second concept which I will discuss is the secularism and the inclusive democracy. Europe learned from their past practices when in the medieval ages there was a conflict on the basis of the sectarian conflict, and ultimately conflict on the basis of religious basis, and then ultimately people they learn and they say secularism is one of the best practices we have to introduce, and then democracy is the best practice to follow. And now still we are confused on these issues. We are confused, And despite this, we have suffered because of absence of these two things, the secularism and the inclusive democracy. And now, when the Modi has introduced Hindutva culture, so we are demanding that there should be secularism in India. It should reverse back to the days when the Nehru was introducing a inclusive democracy and the secularism. So yes, we demand something for on other side of the border. Why not here? So when I discuss with people, the people they become very offended, and then they say, "Okay, we should not talk about this." I say, "No, we have to talk about this, and we have to see the benefit of this." Like what Bernard Lewis said, what went wrong, or what the crashes of Muslim societies, and these are very pertinent, and we have to talk these concept of our society. And once we start talking about these, ultimately these concepts will become acceptable in a society and our culture. And the last point is the feminism. I'm just, you see, very much touchy about these things. 50% part of our society is unfortunately marginalized. And when they talk about their rights and something else, people they say this is a concept which has come from European culture, and these the women who are, you see, marching on the street for their right. They are sponsored women. They are getting financing. They are getting support. They are getting this blah 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 from Western society, and this has nothing to do with our culture, because our culture, our tradition, they provide a lot of you see safeguards to women. But I think we have to come out of these myths, and we have to face realities. And face while facing the realities, we have to focus on these traditions which has been very popular in our society, and then we will be able to, you see, live in a community, in the global community, with a global concept of inclusive community. I have a lot to talk, but I will conclude my talk here, and I will ask Kiran or Rana to further continue. I don't know how much I have bored you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Riaz. I have no words to say. Literally, it was jaws dropping. Honestly, I'm saying this. In fact, I messaged you in between just to tell you how good you were. I mean, believe me, you have touched upon all the aspects of society where prejudice comes in, where these kind of bias comes in. So you picked up the historical perspective, the social perspective, the political perspective, and also the academic perspective. That how do we perceive something? How do we say it's not us, but we practice them? And we are so proud of practicing, irrespective of the fact that deep behind, back in our minds, we are not agreeing to the idea itself. So thank you very much for enlightening us. The floor is now open, everybody, for question and answers. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. You may either turn on your mics and ask the question, or you may write in the chat box. We just have about 5 more minutes with Dr. Riaz, please. So please, I would appreciate if the questions can come in soon.
Ma'am Rana, you have to turn your
Yeah, it's on. Dr. Saab, I don't want to repeat what she has said. I just want to say thank you very much. My question to you, Dr. Saab, is that while you were talking about the historical perspective and how the revivalism of Jamaluddin Afghani's time, and then going back into the collectivity of all the Muslims coming together and revival of the Ummah type of a system. Is there a connection between that philosophy and the philosophy that came during the time of Bhutto when he urged for of establishing an OIC?
Rana, yes, not only this one, but I will say that this concept of Jamaluddin Afghani was further spread. If you see Hassan bin Nabba and other
Yes.
people they talk about not only in political terms, they said that we have to extend this concept to the economics as well. And this present concept of Islamic financing and something else, Islamic banking and other area, they started emerging. He himself was a school teacher who went to US for the training and learning, and later
Right.
on he said that you have to extend this concept, and that's I will say yes, this concept which emerged after Ramzan war in Middle East, when the Jerusalem war, the war of 1967, and then war of 1973, when you say that petrodollar become
Right.
very much popular, and then you try to turn this debate towards economic debate as well, and people they started thinking yes, we have to unite in the concept of Ummah. And my second point will be, okay, because of this petrodollar, which become very you see source of earning for the some monarchies in
Right.
Middle East. Ultimately, they thought that we should create some area of influences in Muslim societies. The poor countries like Pakistan and others, they were willing to accept the hegemony of these petrodollar Middle Eastern country in exchange. Yes, we'll accept your ideology, but you will
Right.
have to provide us the financial system. Ultimately, this was continuation, and ultimately, it was further extension of this concept. You agree? And then we can talk more on this.
Sure,
It is
inshallah,
very
inshallah, some other time. And I
All
wish
right.
it can really come to its original decision makings, right? Please, Dr. Kiran.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Rana. Thank you, Dr. Saab, for responding. Okay, there is a comment from Abid. He is appreciating the discourses that we have, and so is Rosina. My students here would like to ask a question. By the time they're typing, they were just trying to type. Acha. Dr. Riaz, the question is, how can we incorporate inclusive democracy in our teaching? You did explain this while you were sharing that presentation, but something which the students can simply pick up, some practical strategies of actually applying inclusive democracy, because this has become a talk of the town these days.
First of all, we have to undo with the economic system we have in our society. Like first of all, feudalism is still prevailing in our society. That has to be undo with this. Feudalism should be withdrawn. Land should be seized in our country, so that concept of Professor Sara Ansari from University of London, when she wrote about shrines and other in the political culture,
Hmm, hmm,
you have this half of the assembly is coming from a shrine background.
hmm.
It is Yusuf Raza Gilani, it is coming
Ji,
from Abda Hussain, they are coming from Makhtums and something
ji.
else. How you have to undo with this? Because
Hmm, hmm,
second, my third point is this tribal system should be withdrawn. Entire your two provinces are under the influence of your
hmm,
tribal system, whether they're coming from Balochistan, they're coming from KP, or they're coming from other things. So that you have to concept in this concept. Third
hmm,
is unfortunately, if you look to the concept where in certain consequences women are not allowed to participate to cast their vote as well,
oh,
and that's a reason in after the 18th amendment it was made mandatory that at least 10% of the women in those consequences where minimum 10% women vote should be ensured. If there is no, then ultimately it result will. Now 40% still will be missing there. We have to. Third is we have unfortunately divided our society on religious basis as well. Joint electoral, separate electoral on the basis of religious. I have an idea that in Karachi or Punjab, you have some consequences where Muslim, non-Muslim citizen can easily contest, but they are not allowed to contest. So there are many things on which can work, and that's I'm telling you. Adult franchise concept introduced in Europe has not been accepted on one day. It was a long struggle. Like
hmm,
in case of USA, racial issue was very important. Black Americans they had no right to participate. You remember you had an idea when Barack Obama after
yeah,
300 years when he became the president the first time. So societies have gone through different experiences.
yes,
Our
yes.
our experience will be on the basis of our experiences and our thing. So that is my point.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions, anybody? By the time we'll just take one more question, everyone. But just, Dr. Saab, I just want to add one point here. The 8 points that you shared at the end. I think next time onwards, when we will be reviewing the curricula or we'll be reviewing any content or textbook, I think we need to keep this as a template in front of us, the main indicators through which we will actually screen the curriculum to see how well we are justifying and how well we are trying to remove the bias that are there. So,
Hmm.
have you written anything on those 8 points? Have you written any paper or anything where we can actually reach out, we can access that information, and it can then be used by all curriculum reviewers and textbook reviewers in
Uh, uh,
future?
right now, I've just prepared for your session, and I'll be happy if we can do something. So
Yeah.
I'll be late because ultimately our sole objective is that we want to create a society which is inclusive.
G.
We want to create a society where we should nurture the potential of our young generation so that they become part of our inclusive society. I'll be happy to
Polarized.
uh,
Sorry.
I'll I'll be happy to you see contribute in any shape for further in elaboration of this point
G.
further
G.
details you need for this purpose.
G. Just the last question, everybody, before we say thank you to Dr. Saab. Anyone? Um,
Can you request Dr. Riaz to be one of our panelists for the review of the Pakistan studies?
Why not? I've already requested him that.
Okay. I
Whenever,
wasn't aware of
whenever,
that.
whenever Rana is there, it's mean that Rana will be burdening me with a lot of things.
Sorry, doctor. I don't know.
I know,
There are so few humans in this world. What can I do?
Yeah.
the issue is, but sincerely, our objective is to create a society which is inclusive, society which is
Absolutely.
progressive, society which is enlightened, where there is no
Agreed.
discrimination. So, for this
Agreed.
purpose, whatsoever in my capacity, I'll
Yeah.
try to
Because
contribute
because
whatever
Dr.
possible.
Dr. Riaz, my chancellor, is very keen to work on these two subject areas wholeheartedly. One is Pakistan studies and one is Islamic studies. And he sees he wants to really see an enlightened program. He is very sick of the program that are being run because they are not making any impact.
That will be a huge contribution if you can really change this all obsolete concepts we have in the
Yeah.
society.
That's what we
I'll,
are working on, and that's what the
I'll,
reason why we
I'll
are
be happy.
requesting you to be a part of our review committee.
I'll be happy. I'll be happy.
Okay, I think we have no more questions. Dr. Saab, thank you very much.
Thank
You
you.
were excellent. I have no other word, and specifically the areas that you have touched upon. I think it would be an honor if the two institutions can work together collaboratively and write something on this what you have just shared. So not for us, for the future teachers to come, and then they can understand the
Mm.
importance of how to avoid bias whenever it comes to content that we are teaching to our young ones.
I'll
So
be happy.
thank you very much, Dr. Saab, one more time again from on behalf of College of Education, Ziauddin. And inshallah, we'll be inviting you again because you yourself said next time it would be public spare from your end. So hopefully
I'll be.
I'm literally going to catch this up and will invite you again. Thank you. Please take care
Thank,
of yourself.
thank,
Allah
thank,
Hafiz.